So, why don't we start? My name is Rachel. I write for This Woman Votes. I also have a business account. I will be in the chat on my business account. So Rachel Marin is in fact me. I kind of split the two for no reason because I didn't really know what I was doing with Substack when I started almost 2 years ago. So, um, you know, it is what it is. There is no sort of intentionality behind it or anonymity or anything. Do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your community?
So, hi everyone. I'm Nagita Green, and I am the CEO and founder of Disability Community for Democracy. Uh, it's a 100% volunteer, peer-run, grassroots social enterprise that pushes back against um, taking away people's rights. And we're for liberation no matter who's in power, right? We just want to make sure that everyone is equally represented in all facets of society. And what has been happening over the last 18 months has been a clown show, to say the least.
Yeah. So I put a piece out last year. I guess it's been about 18 months. It was, or maybe not that long. I think it was early April of last year. I wrote a piece called "Life Unworthy of Funding." And part of this was because at the time the administration was attacking um, disability care for veterans. And Nick Parrow is going to join us. He hasn't, he'll be jumping in a few minutes. So thanks for all the hearts, Lynette. We appreciate it. That's what sort of pushes it out and gets more people, hopefully, to engage. Um, so when I wrote that piece last year, I saw sort of this immediate attack on veterans and how they treat veterans and how, the entire sort of performative nature of the GOP thanking you for your service and then just ripping away every possible support service that we are giving to veterans, uh, which it's kind of hard to argue. They get broken in service, whether physically or mentally, and then we bring them home and say, well, we don't want to be responsible for your care, even though you were injured in one way, shape, or form in service of our pursuit of colonialism.
I'm going to
Um,
back a little bit on the colonialism comment. I,
Go
I
ahead.
come from a military family myself.
Yep.
So it's not just that. I mean, we do have, territories and colonies, but there were times where, it was just for us to go to war. Um, I like to be accurate, and that's
Yep.
important to me. Also, I will say this: veterans, even with everything they go through, actually do get treated better than the general disability community.
Hmm.
And so, we need to be honest. Like, I think what the administration was trying to do was to actually make it a little more fair because I don't receive Social Security, disability, or SSI. But for some people in the disability community, they're like, "Well, fine, you're disabled, but you should be subject to the same rules as non-disabled individuals who have caps and income limits." Now, it also depends on what kind of disability, how you get your disability, and why. But basically, they're saying it's not fair, and I get it. I understand it from their point of view because 'cause I'm part of that community, but I
Hmm.
also support veterans getting care because I come from a
Yep.
military family. 2 of my family members did serve in combat, my grandfather and my brother, and so, I do believe our people in our military who get injured just and who's just served deserve benefits.
Yep.
But is it should it be unfairly balanced to those who are, born with disabilities or acquire disabilities, and then they're subject to all of these rules and the poverty level in terms they get more money, you know,
Yeah.
than people on general disability do.
Yeah. I wonder if there's like a difference between how they treat, like, almost like a workers' comp. Like, is this and I would argue that what they should have been doing is raising the support for the disability community to match what they're doing for the military community. I don't think we are doing well enough for either community. There should not be a requirement for you to perform your poverty to get the support you need. So I'm curious if we sort of jump into the new memo that came out, which was the reason for what uh what their newest attempt to sort of reduce benefits in one way, shape, or form. Um, with that new memo, one of the things that they've said in the new memo is that if you're on SSI or SSDI, that you're essentially exempt from any of these changes. But there were some things that were hidden sort of in some of the footnotes and other stuff that may directly impact. What are your thoughts on that approach?
You know what? To me, I mean, I spoke to an attorney. I had my friend on
Yep.
yesterday. I trust her legal opinion. I mean, she went to Harvard for undergrad.
Yep.
She went to Columbia for grad school. She's an attorney. She said it's circular. It's a circular memo. They're, are not making any sense. It's outside of the bounds. It goes against case law. I don't even want to talk about, like, given the memo, it's BS. They're it's the memo itself is BS. It's contrary to case law currently.
Right.
And what the memo does is basically, long term, like the case that they are dealing with Texas suing them
Yep.
under they revised why they're suing the federal government. First it was gender dysphoria. They said, fine, we're not going to do that. So a lot of the states dropped out. Texas is the lead plaintiff. Are we surprised? No, not. I have family on my mother's side in Texas. I don't know how my family, who is from New York, who are Latinos, moved to Texas, but that's a different opinion.
Right.
That's a different statement. I would not move there, and because it's one of the worst places for healthcare, one of the worst places for education,
Yep.
and at the end of the day, and it's one of the worst places for disability in the country. And so I'm not shocked that it's them doing this, but at the end of the day, this is about they don't wanna see people with disabilities, especially those who have substance abuse disorders and mental
Right.
illness, but they are saying mental disability, so that includes a whole swath of disabilities that you wouldn't think of, including ADHD and autism. And
Right.
so, and they already wanted to do a registry. So to me, it gives that lawsuit saying that it should be on the states. That's what that does. That's what that memo does at the end of the
Yep.
day. They did it because Stephen Miller s- got involved and said, "Nah, like no more consent decrees. Why are you doing that?" And it's a secondary effect lawsuit that they have, which the federal government has to respond to in August. And this and is basically saying we agree with the plaintiffs here.
Right. So, so from your perspective, you think that this is just going to go round and round through courts and back and forth, even though, you know, uh, they've sort of, it's a group of lawyers that have written it in such a way that's supposed to say, well, this isn't our responsibility as a federal government. This is a state's responsibility. And what this actually did was sort of take a chainsaw, and that's a direct quote, to the state's ability to manage, right? Because most of it hinges on the fact that they don't think that the government should be. They don't think that a disabled person has a right to stay in their own home. That's sort of the root of what a lot of this is about. Um,
Well,
if
they also
that's
don't. They also
Go
don't
ahead.
believe in the right of people with disabilities to have an education, and I just wanna remind people, I'm old enough, I'm young enough, I was born after what we now call the IDA, but I graduated high school before the Olmstead decision was finalized, and Olmstead gives the IDA teeth to enforce the least restrictive environment clause
Right.
in it. So this is beyond just keeping people institutionalized who have mental illness and substance abuse disorder. This is our kids. This
Yeah.
is our young adults who don't graduate high school at the normal age of quote unquote 18, 17, 18 years old because they have disabilities. They graduate at 21 and then what? They
Right.
go depending on where they live, they get more support until they're 24, 25. So this is beyond that. And it's also because home-based community services is optional.
Right.
That's how they get around it. But private action hasn't gone away when it comes to Olmstead yet. It has around Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act. It has around voting, period. But Olmstead, it has not gone away. So there's still
Right.
a way to sue if the states decide to play games. And it's also going to take them a while to do this anyway. They can't just do this. And
Years at this point.
there aren't the institutions anymore. So where are they going to put these people? Jail,
Yep.
right? Jail or warehouse them somewhere in these ICE camps that they can't fill with migrants, regardless if they're undocumented or not.
Yep.
Um, so they it's about money, and I'm sorry, that's kind of sort of ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to, right? Is the money, and that's frequently sort of the chain that I'm always looking through. Where is the money going, and how is this resulting in sort of a capital extraction, right? And in the immigrant case, everything is privatized, right? In the prison system, most states have sort of outsourced that to private enterprise, right? And I think that where we will get to, if this continues to move forward, is forced institutionalization. I mean, that's kind of why they're going this route, so they can force people out of their homes and into institutions, whether it's because of mental illness or substance use disorder, all of those things. Because, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, when we had mental institutions,
Well, it's beyond
um,
actually beyond the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
yeah,
Let's be honest. It actually goes into the 80s. I mean, Ronald Reagan, and you can complain about Ronald Reagan on a lot of things,
right,
but on the one of the things he did get right was closing these institutions down
right,
because they were a issue around violation of 14th Amendment right.
right,
Now, they didn't put money into it. That's really what they're saying.
right,
They didn't put money into it, so it's a problem. No, it's a problem because the federal government under a Republican president at the time, but and this is where I'm gonna shame the Democrats. Democrats have had power in Congress at the
right,
time. They chose not to put money into this and said,
yeah,
"State, figure it out. It's on you."
right. And none of
Private
us are well
ownership.
served. Humanity is not well served by anything that we push down to the states. Like road work, that's fine in the
Or, yeah,
state,
in our territories. I mean, the reality
right?
is that we have a three-tier system in this country. I'm sorry I'm
Yeah.
interrupting you, but I think
No, no, no,
explain
go
this to
ahead.
people. So we have our states, we have our 50 states.
Yep,
There's that level of representation and tier. You have your 2 members of Senate and your House member. DC, you could vote for president, but you have a delegate. You don't have representation or voting representation in Congress, but you can vote for president. Territories, which is the worst place for a U.S. citizen to be with disabilities, you have
right,
zero representation, and if you And because of the way the social safety nets are funded, depending on which territory you live in,
Right.
at the end of the day, you have to come to the United States. So they don't fund Medicaid in the same way. They do a lot of block grants around SNAP and Medicaid. They even had a case of a Puerto Rican man who got SSI in the States, moved to Puerto Rico, and the Supreme Court said, nah, he has to pay all that money back because he now lives in Puerto Rico, even though he got it here. And,
Wow.
he got it. Yes. So this is why it's important for people to understand how our system works and why I'm saying, like, I'm not wasting my time in the footnotes and all of that, because at the
Yep.
end of the day, it's circular. They're going against whatever case law, and they make up whatever they want. And I'm I'm willing to answer a couple questions, but I would love to play a video that my friend that
Okay.
I did a live with yesterday, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Let me see if I can find it. But what is your thoughts? Do you have more experience on the children's side than I do, like, recently? I'm thinking about my own childhood, and I don't want my, my friend's children or my niece to go back to what that's like.
Yeah, it's not just their displeasure at integrated education. Um, they don't want integration in any aspect of community life. They don't want to see the disabled. I mean, I think it's pretty clear from their public statements and behavior that Stephen Miller and Donald Trump are just disgusted by disabled people. And they don't want to see them. They don't want to spend money to take care of them. And what they're trying to do here is take Medicaid funding and redirect it from giving people services in the community which are cheaper, more effective, and allow people to participate in meaningful family life, community life, hold a job, make money, be part of their community, have a whole human experience, and instead lock them up somewhere and pay their jailers an inordinate amount of federal dollars to keep them there. So what this memo does is it pretends that instead of saying unnecessary institutionalization is discrimination, that the court said unnecessary institutionalization can be discrimination, which is not what they said.
I wanted to play that for a reason because
Yep.
this is she's the expert legally, and
Yep.
she's like, no, they're lying. They're
Right.
lying,
But so they lie left and right. That is sort of uncontested information. At this point, it's not even a controversial statement to say if their lips are moving, they're lying. Um, you know, so is this, I think that what we've seen in a lot of cases is the pushback requires lawyers. And the pushback and lawyers require money. And in the meantime, behind the scenes, they're setting up this entire sort of industrialized system where they're picking up people on the streets and putting them in jail. I moved from Florida to Oregon. In Florida, we essentially made poverty illegal, right? So if you get picked up in Florida and you don't have money in your pocket, you're a vagrant and they put you in jail. They solved their homeless problem by putting people in jail. In Oregon, they have a completely different approach, but that also results in a lot of people who are either mentally disabled or physically disabled living on the streets, not to mention unhoused veterans and all of sort of that. So when you start looking at sort of where the money is being spent and where, like, people are like Geo and the big sort of prison companies are making money housing immigrants, and all of the ICE detention centers are sort of growing. what's to stop them from just utilizing the ICE detention centers to house people that they don't want to look at, right? Their disdain for the disabled is absolutely clear, crystal clear.
Well, I think there's a couple of issues that I can say that are a little bit different in this case. Number one, you have parents of the disabled
Yep.
who are not going to tolerate this.
Yep.
That's how Willowbrook got closed eventually, because they decided to sit.
Yep.
And so having the parents of people with disabilities who cannot totally care for themselves actually does help the disability community. There are disability organizations that are saying not on our watch. And there's a whole generation of disabled people like myself. If you're a younger Gen Xer, if you were born 1976 and after, realistically,
Yep.
if you use the age of your brain is fully developed at the age of 25. So if you were born in 1976, your brain was fully developed in 2001. You grew up with full access of Rehabilitation Act, fully implemented, IDA, have hazardly implemented depending on your school district. But
Yep.
you were in middle school, right? You were in middle school or high school, depending on, your month of year, if you were born in 1976. I'm just using
Yep.
that as here, just makes math sense. The ADA was signed in 1990. So it was either the summer of your last year in 8th grade, or,
Yep.
in middle school, or your first year, freshman year of high school, depending on where you live. And so you have a whole generation of younger Gen Xers who grew up, and elder millennials who are like, "Oh, hell no, we're not going back to that." There is, and this is where I kind of push back on, like, all Gen Xers are the same. No, because if you're born in like 73 and before, you have a totally different lived
I was born in
experience.
68.
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
born a year after my aunt was born. And so our parents, if you're a younger Gen Xer, your parents might be part of Generation Jones. My parents are part of Generation Jones. They're not, especially my mom and my stepfather. My stepfather was born in 1962. My mom was born in 1959. So I have a different experience as a Gen Xer, having and my father was born in 56,
Yep.
having, they were children, right? They did not come of age until the 70s or 80s, early 80s, with my stepfather.
Yep.
So that's a different lived experience. I have more in common with elder millennials and my millennial counterparts versus, hi, Nick.
Hey,
Nick just magically appears.
Matt.
Hi, Nick.
Let me finish this thought.
I heard
versus-
millennial, and my body was like, "Here comes the millennials.
Yes,
They're coming in hot."
and well, it's versus the older Gen Xers who are like, okay, well, we've seen this before, and what are we gonna do about it? It's like, they're afraid to open up the ADA. Younger folks are like, we're not. It was the millennials. There was an 8-year-old who was a millennial who was climbing up those stairs. Was not
Yeah.
the older Gen Xers who were 18, 17, 18 years old doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. From my
That's
perspective, and thank you so much for joining, Nick. We were
Yes.
just sort of talking about the differences, the generational differences between how we think about disability. So my grandmother, I was born in 68. My grandmother had multiple sclerosis and was wheelchair bound by about 72. She lived well into the 90s. So she spent, 30 plus years in a wheelchair. And so I've always had just a sensitivity to accessibility, because I was always like pushing the chair. And then when she had the scooter, things got a little bit easier, but then also harder, because she had this idea of she wanted this independence, but then accessibility was still not that big in the 80s and 90s. Thanks for joining, Nick. What is your thought on sort of the idea of the generational differences between how we view the ADA and sort of that and the necessary protections for it?
Well, the ADA was signed into law the year I was born. And so for
Okay.
my entire life, the ADA has been there, um, which is not something I want to see go away.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up with classrooms that were integrated where if you needed to do a pullout for a little bit, you went to your special ed class and you came back.
Yep.
Um, to me, it wasn't like I was 9 when Olmstead got signed into, or the Olmstead decision was done at the Supreme Court. Like, so for most of my livable and rememberable life, these rights have been there. Like for
Yeah.
us, these are rights that we have. Um,
These are younger millennials, though. Elder millennials have a different
yeah,
experience.
I'm like I'm mid millennial. Um, And so I have this weird, like close to older millennials and young millennials. Like there's still a bridge between my part of the generation and the younger side. Like I remember the 90s, whereas the youngest of the millennials don't. Um, and I remember pre internet. But I remember all of the I remember always that our classrooms were accessible for the most part. Like as I start remembering, and I think by the time I was in high school, because I was in high school after Olmstead, like there was really no separation.
No more
And
pullouts. No more pullouts in your generation, unlike mine.
yeah, we didn't have, unless it was for like you need extra time on a test and your disability required either through a 504 or an IEP, like
The
you
separate
get a
location.
you get a smaller classroom environment for test taking, but you're still not alone. I mean, you're in a small classroom with a teacher that you trust and know. Like
Yep.
it's how they do it with my daughter for her stuff, for her plan. It's how they do it with my son for his plan. Like I rely on the ADA and the protections that it offers and ID and the idea or IDA. What is it, Naida? The other one?
IDA.
The IDA, 504, like we rely on these so my kids can have
Yeah.
an education that is equitable for them because equality is not really what we should be striving for. To be honest, I think equality sets a level playing field, but not an equitable playing field. And accessibility and the ADA for me are equitabilities and making it so that it's a true everybody has a better quality, true life of living style. So that's my impression on the ADA. It is it's really good. Like it has improved accessibility throughout my life. I never think about buildings without unaccessibility. Like I look at a building and I go, where's the ramp? And if there's no ramp that I can easily see, I go, that's a bad design. Like that was that's like that's just what we grew up with.
Right.
Seeing all that happen. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was in that makes me think of my spring trip this year because we went to Portugal for 3 weeks and there is nothing accessible in Portugal. Like there are a lot of places when you travel, for all of our concerns about where the American government is taking us, um, the services that we do have here, especially when it comes to accessibility, are actually shockingly a lot better than other places, in particular throughout most of Europe. I'm curious.
And Canada too.
And
And Canada.
Canada. And Canada, yeah. So it's kind of, I mean, it's where we've we want to appreciate the things that we have, but we also are looking at a situation where we are going to have to fight tooth and nail for services not to be taken away.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's what we're doing now, is fighting tooth and nail to make
Yep.
sure services aren't being taken away. Now you to go.
no, I was gonna say, Nick, if you want to drop the say no to Crip Crow
Yep.
link in the chat. And I was gonna say, we were getting ready to talk about lawyers and stuff like that, and I was gonna bring up Epstein, right? Epstein
Yep.
files was totally public pressure, and we can do the same thing again. How they did it with Capital Crawl. We're going to need lawyers, of course, to give us guidance and people who are policy experts, which this is where this is where like my access to different types of people comes into play. This is, where I can call on a lawyer, or I can call on a policy person and say, "Hey," and people who've worked on Capitol Hill. This is where those experiences matter. I also serve in government at my local level. I serve on my local commission for disability. And so I understand that it's gonna take some time, but we need them to understand that government, like the federal government, is not a partner. Like us in local government need to local county and state government need to scream from the rooftops. Federal
Oh,
government is not a local partner. The members of Congress who represent our cities, you work for us. And if you don't
Yep.
do your job, we're going to replace you.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. And it shouldn't matter. And it doesn't matter it doesn't even matter if they have the same party as you. If you cannot get behind codifying Olmstead without adding all this extra stuff around, long-term care facilities. I'm not saying that stuff isn't important, or housing. We need Olmstead codified yesterday. If that's my opinion. Nick, go ahead. I'm
yeah.
off the box because I've been
No,
talking.
we do. We do. We need it codified yesterday. We need to make sure that we continue this push forward in how we talk about it. Like, they're putting out new information that I have to read in on more. They're trying to update. But we need, no matter what, like, whatever they're saying they're going to do or change their approach on it, it doesn't change the solution that we need, which is to codify the Olmstead decision into law. And that's it. Like, we're not changing our approach. What they're doing, they can change all they want. Like, our message is simple and it's not going to change and it's easy to get behind, is codify Olmstead into law, protect disability rights. Do not
Yep.
allow states and territories to forcibly institutionalize people. One, we don't have the facilities. Two, it's expensive as fuck. Like,
Yeah.
Dr. Eric Lulov did a study on it, did a report on it that he showed us, and like, it's like 5-6 times more expensive through taxpayer funding to
Right.
institutionalize people than it is to let them live at home or use community care or short-term services and inpatient that are actually, you can leave, outpatient services, like grippy sock vacations at the VA. Like, those should be accessible to everybody because they are way less expensive. Your in-home care is way less expensive. It also employs more people, and it provides employment opportunities for people who really enjoy being caretakers, who really want to be live-in support. Like, it opens up new employment opportunities for people. Like, I don't understand what people don't get about that side too, is like, the argument around this is it is a net positive on the economy. Like, the regressive side, I won't say Republicans, because there are good Republicans out there.
Yeah.
They may
I,
be in
I think that
hiding, but,
I think there's a
but
couple of
yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a couple of sort of things here from how they look at humanity. Caring for people in home is predominantly employing women. We don't want that in this administration. It is creating an environment of care, and we don't want care in this administration. When you think about how they have approached everything else, I think what they're much more interested in doing is warehousing humans that they don't want out in the world. They
Yes.
don't want, and I think that the direction that they're taking today is very much about a way for them to create an environment that is within the for-profit institutional system. So, Corgio and those guys that run all of our ICE detention centers will find themselves in this position. And it doesn't exclude children either, because in this for-profit world, in particular, when you look at how we manage the ICE detention centers, they charge more for children, which is why they have a vested interest in jailing more immigrant children. So it's not a stretch to think that the people behind the scenes are working at this from the perspective of, we want to house or warehouse people. We don't want to care for people.
Correct.
And I think that's the difference between the two sides. We want to warehouse people. We don't want to look at them. We want to extract as much money into the capitalist system versus we want to care for people and, employ women.
But you can actually, this is the problem when is it an either or argument. You can have capitalism and care for people. Like this is not an either or argument. And also the other problem with, like, if we just break it down, like, these prisons are going to do this or whatever, the institutions are run, like, these institutions are run by the state, not by the federal government. And as somebody who has experience working on this side, it is not as easy as sticking these people in just warehouses, because you need licensing and you need to actually have a license to take care of disabled folks. States are not going to give licenses if people are going to die, because the states don't want to be sued, because that's what happened with Willowbrook, right? Like I people need to I understand people are upset and freaked out. And I'm not saying that don't be. But we also have to understand, if they're going to push this to the states have laws that they have to follow, or they can be sued. And the states don't have the same coverage around, not being able to be sued. Like, you can sue, like, for example, City of New York does something, like if they harm somebody in their hospitals or the police, brutality or something like that, you can sue the City of New York. It's not like suing the federal government. You can sue every other branch of government. I don't see states like New York or Massachusetts or Vermont, even Vermont has a Republican governor, saying, we're going to expose ourselves to lawsuits and then have to pay all this money out in state court, because they would sue in state court, not federal court. This is where federalism matters. Unless, Nick, you have a different opinion on that, but that's what I'm thinking in terms of my lived experience on where
No, I don't have a differing opinion on that. I think we should be using the court system to our advantage. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say anything on that, but I think enforcing the law as it is written is a good idea. Like, there are some really good laws on the books that we can enforce through either state or federal or both. I think we should be using this. They use what they call lawfare, but we could use a similar approach of upholding the lawfare. Like, upholding the law isn't lawfare. It's just upholding the law. And, like, Germany collapsed to the Nazis because the lawyers stopped doing their jobs, because the courts were like, nah, we don't want to enforce the law. because the lawyers stopped and became Nazis themselves. That was how Germany ended up the way it was, because the law eroded, because it was meaningless anymore, except for what the German Reich enforced, what the
Right.
Third Reich did. Like, that is their game plan. That's what they're doing. They're eroding law. They're following the fascistic playbook, page by page by page. And
Yep.
so the pushback on that is state level enforcement is we uphold the damn law. Like, if you have an attorney general that is not suing the federal government for violating state law or suing these prison industries for violating state laws, then they're
Yeah.
not doing their job and they need to be replaced. We should be replacing, and we should also be adding in a mechanism to recall and replace our elected officials so that we don't have to worry about this, like Mitch McConnell thing where he's dead, but nobody wants to say he's dead because there's no
Schrodinger,
proof that he's
Senator.
dead, but he's pretty close to being dead. And even if he was alive, he can't do his damn job. So he should be resigned anyways. And they should be holding an election. Like, we shouldn't have to be worrying about that. If if you can't do your job, the state can then go, okay, we're going to recall you and do it. I
Yeah.
think we should be changing things on both the state and federal level. I'm focused on the federal level side of part of this engagement. For the federalism piece is the
Yep.
13th Amendment is broken and we need to fix it. For-profit prisons and the prison industry complex was slavery rebranded, and we need to finally stop it. Like,
Yep.
we wouldn't be worried about warehousing people at a state level if we didn't have a for-profit institutionalized system for prison.
So Oregon
Or
voted against that.
or I'm gonna just or a history at the state level, because again, I used to work as a peer advocate in the state and county hospitals. And in the states, we always say this, private, private, private. The states, if you look at our prison system, the worst prisons in our country and jails are not state, is not private. It's literally the states, and only out of the top 5, only one is a county facility, which is Rikers, right? But the rest of them are state institutions. So this is the reason why they quote unquote want to move to privatization, because there is this history of the states doing a god awful job. But the problem is that if you move away from move towards privatization, you have bad actors in this environment now that you didn't have before, and no real mechanism to hold them accountable. So I understand, like, people being concerned on the private side. I'm more concerned about the states, given the history of our ugly laws, and them putting those laws on the books at the
Yep.
level and stuff like that. That wasn't private. That was local government and state government doing that.
And this is where the use of codifying Olmstead into federal law comes in handy, because it then federalizes and says, even at the state level, you can't do this. You cannot bring ugly laws back, is basically what it says. You cannot force people into an institution without their approval, and or their provider, and when their provider and patient are done, they get out. They get to go home. They get to make the decisions they want. Like, we could also change the way that we do prisoning and like imprisonment and turn it into a rehabilitation system rather than a confinement and oppression system. Like, we could go down that road too, but that's not this conversation. There's a lot we could do on that side that would fundamentally change how this country viewed prisoners and the way that we treat them and how we abandon them in many ways without the hope of ever reintegrating them into society. And we should be focused more on the positive side of that, which is the reintegration. The care
restorative
side.
justice.
Yeah. We should be doing care-based economy, care-based justice, care-based systems. Like, that's where we're at, is we have the chance to fundamentally do that. And one of the first steps to a care-based system right now, anyways, in a focused way, is codifying Olmstead into law, because
Yeah.
then states and territories are guaranteed the funding to do the services, to provide the grants, to ensure that services are available. Like, that's the whole point, is to make
Right.
sure there's no excuse when Sarah Huckabee Sanders decides to do something stupid in Arkansas and the Arkansas state legislation does something stupid, like waste our money on buying a new state prison and building a new state prison on territorial land in a county that didn't want it, and then you tried to suppress their vote by not letting them do a special election to get their state senator back into their seat, and you were forced to do that because you got sued twice and lost in the state constitution and SCOTUS. So fuck you, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you suck. We still don't want that prison. Like, nobody wants that state-run prison. Talk about state-run facilities. Nobody fucking wants that in our state. We don't want more state-run facilities like that. We want
So-
and that was coming from like sheriffs and stuff, like conservative sheriffs who were like, we don't want this. This is not what we need. We need a different approach. When
Yeah.
when the sheriffs are saying we need a different approach,
Yeah.
it's time for a new fucking approach.
And also, just to piggyback on what Nick is saying, is that most of the people who are in prison have some sort of disability. So that's the reason why we have to talk about Olmstead in prisons, because that's what ends up happening, is that if somebody commits a crime because of their disability, like, mental illness or substance abuse disorder, the first thing is to put them in jail instead of to get them treatment. It should
Right.
always be. That's why Olmstead ensuring why they have drug court, right? Drug court exists. Drug court didn't exist before 2000, realistically, right? It exists partially as a indirect effect of Olmstead, right? It's the least restrictive environment possible until obviously they ratchet it up. If you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you do need to then be punished for it. But it's not the first thing they do now. And because it's a treatment first model in that way. And that's again due to Olmstead indirectly. And so that's one. And two, when people who are politically more conservative but more progressive in terms of their thinking are saying stuff like this, like myself and others, it's bad. It's bad if we're saying, yo, I don't want to pay this. To me, this is like, I'm not trying to pay more taxes to fund facilities where it's cheaper to keep them in the community. The return on investment sucks.
Right.
And I know some people are just going to say, well, why are you treating people like that? But you got to speak the language of the population you're talking to. This is about ROI, return on investment.
Yep.
Return on investment means if we're, quote unquote, trying to run government as a business, which the Republicans always say they do, but they don't.
They don't.
You need to make sure that the investment makes sense. What they're proposing does not make sense from a business perspective.
As a shareholder who pays taxes, none of what is being done makes sense. Like, we should have a major shareholder meeting and vote these assholes out. Like a CEO, if they want to treat it like a company, the CEO can get his ass voted out. If enough shareholders are like, yeah, no, fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
we own the government. The government
own the
doesn't
government.
own us.
Yes. I mean, so part of what I see a lot of the struggle is sort of the difference between federal and state is that there is an uneven application right? Arkansas can be as shitty as they want to be because they have a Republican majority. They can do whatever they want. Oregon, under duress, which I would argue is a purple state, not a blue state. But Oregon does what it does. It's very different. Florida, it has become a nightmare. And some of this is because the difference between states and federal, right? Federal provides, I think, better protections. But when you look at these organizations, and where GEO is spending money on lobbying and where CORE is spending money on lobbying, I mean, all you have to do is read their quarterly filings. They say it all outright in their quarterly filings, how much they spend on lobbying, how much money they're making, what it's looking like. If you look at just their stock price, you can tell the advantages that they have. Their stock prices have exploded literally since the inauguration because they are just getting a huge benefit from this. And if there's a disparity between state services and federal services, and there's no portability of your Social Security and your Medicaid, and every time you move from state to state, in Oregon, and I've gone through this with my mom. My mom is in long-term memory care. So if I move her to the next county, if I decide I'm going to move down south and I just move her to a county, I end up having to requalify and go through all of the process, right? And what you were talking early on about sort of the differences between the states, the differences between the territories, and hold on, let me see if I can re-add Nick. I don't know.
Well, I want to piggyback on that because we have the same issue in New York State as well. And then there's also the other issue that we don't talk about is I'm from New York, and if I needed to, when I moved due to intimate partner violence from Westchester County, where I grew up, to New York City for safety, I had to reapply for benefits all over again. Because and this is the reason why, though, and this part, it doesn't get talked about a lot. When the states outsource social services to counties get to also add, or the counties have to do the bare minimum the state requires. But also the counties also can add things to their array for social services that the county pays for. So that's the reason why for the reapplying, not so much. So I live in Massachusetts, for example. It's run by the state. Social services is run by the state. So it doesn't matter if I move from...
So you can move from county to county.
I can move from county to county. It depends on your state. Also, all Republican governors are not bad, because Vermont has a Republican governor and has for a very, very long time, and is actually one of the best states, according to, I forget which study.
It is expensive as fuck to live there, though.
And in comparison to Massachusetts, not so much, though. But in terms of disability, in terms of rural, it's in it's in the top 5, and it's a Republican governor with a Republican legislators. But the difference is these are old school Republicans. These aren't the progressive Republicans we're talking about. That governor said no to Trump when he asked for National Guard. He voted for MVP Kamala Harris. So again, that matters, because there's very few Republicans left of that Northeast moderate strain, but you can't win in a state like Vermont if you're MAGA, because they vote for Bernie Sanders, and their AP is a Democrat.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot. Is there anything you want to sort of finish on? I'd like to ask everybody to subscribe if you're not already subscribing. There should be a link at the top. Naida, do you want to sort of...
Well, let Nick go first.
I'll go first because I got to jump for another show that I'm getting on right after this. Is the big thing is go to broadbanner.com/crip-crow. I just dropped the link in the chat. I'll do it again too. Is crip-crow. It is the action campaign to say no to Crip Crow, to call your legislators on the federal level so that we can get Olmstead codified into law, because this is probably one of the least publicized but most important attacks that this administration has done on everybody's rights. Because if warehousing and forced institutionalization become a real thing, hey, nerd, chill. If forced institutionalization becomes allowed again, it will not be in institutions. It will be in warehouses. And that is the plan. And they wanted this to go under the radar, and we caught their asses. And we're not going to let them do that. So we all come together and we say no to Crip Crow. So go to broadbanner.com/crip-crow. And that's my pitch for the day. Rachel.
Awesome. Thanks,
It's been
Nick.
so good to see you. We'll have you on. I'll have you on for a show soon too. It's been a while since we've talked.
And
I'll
Rachel,
see you soon.
I'll have you
Naida,
on.
I'll see you soon, friend.
Yeah, see you later.
I'd be happy to join you guys anytime. Thanks, everyone.
So let me just
Go ahead.
hit Disability Community for Democracy. We have a publication called Nothing About Us Without Us. And I'm going to make this very clear. We need money to actually go to DC and lobby. So we will not receive any government funding, any foundation. This is all us. We are a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit organization that doesn't have a tax exempt status. We did that so we can actually lobby, like truly lobby, without having to worry about all the different tax rules. This is what happens when you're a tax professional for your job. So if you want to support the work of Disability Community for Democracy, which is known as Disability Community on Substack, subscribe if you haven't already to Nothing About Us Without Us. Become a paid annual subscriber, or just subscriber, period. If you become an annual subscriber, you get 30% off forever. It funds our work. I mean, that's the bottom line. Like to be professional in emails and all of that, that's not free.
Right.
And the last thing I will say is that we need bodies. And Nick did say, go to the Crip Crow website. When you go there, also sign up for updates, because we are getting ready to do a lobby day in August, at the end of August, to keep pushing back, where we're going to go to we're going to organize to go to House members and senators at the end of August to say, you need to do this. We're going to do everything in our power, like people are doing with Epstein, with this. We're not going back to pre-1973. Nobody wants that. And
nobody wants that.
The last thing I will say is that, just a reminder, if you think this can't happen to you, you don't have a disability, if you're pushing back against this administration, they can weaponize your dissent as protest psychosis. That is a term. You can look it up. They did it to Black men in the 1960s, especially with schizophrenia, but it was not only Black men they did it to. That it was disproportionately done to them, but it was also done to white women as well. And so
they just whip out a lobotomy. Just rip that frontal lobe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, they don't want us fighting back. They want us uneducated. They want us not healthy. And the only way they get away with that is if they are allowed to crush dissent and institutionalize people who they think are broken or are not worthy. So that's all I have on that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me. This has been great. It was nice meeting you, and we'll talk again.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for reaching out and subscribing. I really appreciate it. And I'll have you on Nothing About Us Without Us. Now that I know you have a disability, I'll bring you on to my show to talk about your work.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
I don't know how to end it.